Welcome back. So we see Jeremiah still continue pleading with the people to turn away from their idols and worship God. To him and to me, even as I read, it didn't make sense that they were worshiping things made from things that God had created. God made like the trees which they used to make the wood that they used to carve their idols, and the gold and the silver that they overlaid it with. I love verse 11 that says, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. I mean, that just basically just wraps it up. And to be honest, that just tells you what it really is when you look at idolatry or idol worship from those lenses. While most of us today may not actually have man-made idols, like the idols made of wood and materials, we may have idols in form of things, people or activities that we turn to for safety, comfort, or happiness instead of finding that in God. So while reading this chapter, I took some time to examine myself, to just say, what are the idols in my life? Is it social media? Is it my phone? Is it my family? And I think it might be worth you doing the same. And when I finished, I just prayed, and I was like, the first thing is, when you identify it, then you are now conscious. And I say, Lord, help me. Because sometimes we think that, as long as I don't have some statue I'm bowing to, I don't have an idol. But it might very well be the opposite. As he spoke about the coming captivity of Judah, Jeremiah spoke as Judah actually. He spoke as them, acknowledging that the so-called leaders of Judah weren't actually seeking God. This pointed to the fact that in order for the leaders to properly lead the people, they had to be following God, not just themselves. So I think that was actually very profound for me, because the people, as much as they were sinning, their leaders were the ones leading them, and the priests and the scribes and all these people were literally leading them astray. In verse 23 it says, "O Lord, I know the way of a man is not in himself. It is not a man who walks to direct his own steps. It is God that directs our steps at the end of the day." God had told Jeremiah, from what we read yesterday, that he shouldn't pray for the people. So, but at the end of chapter 10, he prays as the people. So I was like, Jeremiah, your heart is truly, truly. Remember yesterday I spoke about how his heart was really, with the people. And here he prayed as if he was the people to God, because God said, don't pray for the people. In 11:14, God tells him again not to pray for the people, because Judah will surely be judged as Israel had been judged earlier. I couldn't help but think back to this, to the era of the judges. Remember the cycle of apostasy. They would sin, and then the prophets would pray and God would forgive them, and even the judges would pray. But in this part, God is saying no. Jeremiah couldn't intercede for them. God had it. And remember how far away the time of the judges were. So imagine that had continued and continued. So sometimes it made me think about the fact that sometimes evil people will do things for so long and will think that they're getting away with it. But here we know that judgment will definitely come. And now it seems almost very harsh that God is saying, no, don't pray for them, I don't care. What's going to happen will happen. But remember that they have been forgiven. Remember that cycle of the judges. It was so frustrating at some points, right? Now we see how infinite God's patience really is. God revealed the plot against his life to Jeremiah by some of his own family and community members. And he lamented to God. And his lament caused God to punish the evil plotters. Now, I felt bad, but then I could also relate. Most times the people who are speaking God's word are unpopular, especially to those who, are doing what they like. So it's as if you are judging me and all of that. It was really sad to see that even his family was plotting against him. We've already established earlier from Gideon's story that it was okay to question God. Respectfully, remember, we said respectfully. So in chapter 12, Jeremiah asked God the age-old question, why do the wicked prosper? He was confused by God's seeming delay in judging the people and punishing the wicked and the unrighteous. And I think this didn't have to do with the people at home at large. I think it had to do with the people who were plotting against his life. Jeremiah needed, God responded to him, telling him that the worst was still yet to come, but he needed endurance to withstand the struggle that was going to be his life. Now, unfortunately, God never promised Jeremiah an easy life, and we'll see how his own prophecy was what I like to call a suffer head. If suffer head, prophets run, but God did promise him that he would be with him every step of the way. God's desire for the salvation of even Israel's worst enemies, even if they repented, stood out to me, and that we saw in chapter 12, verse 16. That even if the worst, of the pagan nations repented, God was willing to, hold back his anger from them. And then he used the linen sash. Remember the parable, or it wasn't really a parable, it was sort of like an acting out of the linen sash. He used it as a metaphor for dealing with Judah's pride, and I found it very poignant. I see what God meant about Jeremiah needing strength for this prophet life, because it was not easy. Remember, he had to go and take that sash after it was rotten. He had to wear it, and Jeremiah had a real MVP. So here's what I learned about God. God is with us in every single moment, in every step of our lives. In 11:4 it says, "Listen to my voice and do all that I command you, so that you will be my people and I will be your God." The best thing we can do is listen to God's voice and do what he says. He cares about us, and he wants us to walk with him to achieve his desired plan for our lives through his loving help and his guidance. So why don't you today listen to God's voice and obey? Thanks for joining me. See you tomorrow.